Take it. It's yours.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Damian Mercer had given a poor single mother his black card in the middle of a luxury hotel gala, expecting to prove a point about greed. He thought she would disappear into the city chasing things she had never touched before. Designer stores, 5-star rooms, a taste of a world that was never meant for her. Instead, 43 minutes later, a transaction lit up his phone that made his blood run cold. It wasn't a boutique. It wasn't a restaurant. It wasn't even a hotel. It was a legal archive, a restricted one. The charge was tied to a name Damian had not heard spoken out loud in years. Mercer Grand. The first hotel his family ever built. The one that burned down in a fire that had been buried, erased, rewritten. He stared at the screen. Heart pounding, because the woman he had just dismissed as another desperate stranger wasn't spending his money. She was digging into a past his family had paid millions to keep dead. And for the first time in his life, Damian Mercer realized he hadn't just handed over a credit card. He had handed someone the key to destroy everything his name was built on. 12 hours earlier, Damian had believed this would be nothing more than an experiment. The ballroom of the Mercer Crown Hotel in downtown Chicago glowed with controlled perfection. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light over polished marble floors, and every surface reflected wealth so effortlessly that it felt almost invisible. The kind of place where money didn't announce itself. It simply existed unquestioned. Damian moved through the crowd like he owned the air people breathed. Which, in a way, he did. At 38 years old, he was the CEO of one of the most powerful hotel empires in the country. Mercer Crown Hotels operated in 14 cities, with expansion deals stretching across 2 continents. Investors trusted him. Boards feared him. Competitors studied him. And none of them knew how little he believed in people. "Your speech is in 20 minutes, Vivian Cole said quietly beside him, her voice precise, controlled, never wasting a word. "Press coverage is already trending. This launch needs to stay clean." Damian didn't look at her. His gaze drifted across the room, scanning faces, reading expressions the way other people read headlines. "Everything stays clean," he replied. "Because I control what gets messy." Vivian didn't smile. She never did. You don't control people. You manage damage. That was closer to the truth. Damian had learned early that trust wasn't a virtue. It was a liability. His father had built Mercer Crown with ruthless clarity. People either served a purpose or they became a problem. And problems were removed. That belief had shaped everything Damian had become. Across the ballroom, a sudden shift broke the rhythm of the evening. A raised voice, sharp, irritated. Guests didn't like interruptions, especially not ones that sounded like trouble. Damian turned his head slightly. Near the service entrance, a woman stood frozen in place. Her uniform was simple black slacks, white shirt, name tag slightly crooked. Her dark hair was pulled back, though strands had come loose, framing a face that looked more tired than young. A little girl stood behind her, half hidden, clutching the woman's sleeve. "Are you even listening to me?" A man snapped, his voice loud enough to ripple through nearby conversations. He held up his phone, his expression twisted with annoyance. "My watch is gone, and you were the last one near my table." The woman shook her head quickly. "I didn't take anything, sir. I was clearing plates. That's all." The man laughed, sharp and dismissive. "Of course you didn't. You people never do right." The phrase hung in the air, ugly and familiar. The little girl tightened her grip. Damian watched without moving. Security hesitated at the edge of the scene, unsure whether to intervene. No one wanted to escalate something in front of high-profile guests. But no one wanted to look away either. The woman's voice dropped quieter now. "Please. You can check my bag. I didn't take anything. Or the man said, stepping closer, we can call the police and let them sort it out. That changed everything. The girl stepped forward instinctively. My mom didn't. June, the woman whispered sharply, pulling her back. Damien exhaled slowly. He had seen this before, 100 times, maybe 1,000. Wealth accusing poverty, power assuming guilt. And most of the time it ended exactly the same way. But something about this moment didn't sit right. Check the footage, Damien said. The room shifted. The man turned, startled. Excuse me. Damien stepped closer, now his presence quiet but absolute. Conversations nearby faded. People watched without pretending not to. You said she was the last one near your table, Damien continued. Then there's footage. Let's check it. The man hesitated. Just for a second. It was enough. Vivian was already signaling to security. Within minutes, a tablet appeared. Footage played. The man's table, the watch, his own hand slipping it into his coat pocket while he answered a call. Silence followed. Then discomfort. Then embarrassment that didn't quite reach apology. The man cleared his throat. Well, must have been a misunderstanding. He didn't look at the woman as he walked away. He didn't need to. The damage had already been done. The woman, Lena, according to her name tag, stood still for a moment, her shoulders rigid, her eyes lowered. The girl clung to her side, looking up like she was trying to understand something that didn't make sense. Damien studied them. There was no relief on Lena's face. No gratitude. Just exhaustion. The kind that didn't come from a long shift, but from a long life. Are you okay? He asked. She nodded quickly. Yes, sir. Thank you. Her voice was steady. Too steady. Most people in her position would have said more, apologized for the inconvenience, expressed gratitude in ways that made others comfortable. She didn't. She just held her daughter a little closer. Vivian stepped in beside him. We should move on. This isn't. Wait, Damien said. He didn't know why he said it. Not exactly. Maybe it was the way the girl looked at him. Not with admiration, not with fear, but with something sharper. Something that felt like judgment. Or maybe it was something else. Something he couldn't quite name. He reached into his jacket and pulled out his wallet. Lena tensed immediately. Sir, I don't need, I know, Damien said. He slid the black card free. Even in a room full of wealth, it stood out. Matte black. Minimal design. No limit, no explanation. He held it between them. For 24 hours, he said. It's yours. She stared at him. I don't understand. You don't have to, he replied. Use it however you want. No conditions, no questions. Vivian's voice dropped, urgent. Damien, this is a mistake. He ignored her. Lena's hands didn't move. Why would you do this? He met her eyes. Because I want to see something, he said quietly. I want to see what someone does when they have nothing and suddenly have everything. The girl looked between them, confused. Lena hesitated. Her fingers trembled slightly as she took the card like she expected it to disappear the moment she touched it. This isn't real, she whispered. It is, Damien said. 24 hours. That's it. He stepped back. The moment hung between them, fragile and dangerous. Then he turned and walked away. Behind him, Vivian caught up quickly. You just handed unlimited access to company-linked funds to a stranger with no background check, no verification, no. She's not going to surprise me, Damien said. Vivian stopped. You sound certain. I am. But as he reached the center of the ballroom again, something in his chest felt unsettled. Not doubt. Not yet. Just a quiet question he refused to answer. Less than an hour later, his phone buzzed. He glanced down. and everything inside him went still. Because the first charge wasn't what he expected. It wasn't greed. It wasn't desperation. It was Mercer Grand. And in that moment, Damian Mercer realized one thing with terrifying clarity. This woman wasn't trying to escape poverty. She was coming straight for his past. Damian stared at the transaction notification until the screen dimmed in his hand. Mercer Grand. The name hit him with the force of an old scar being split open. For years it had existed inside the Mercer family like a sealed room no one entered. The official story was simple. A tragic fire. A terrible loss. A property that had never recovered. His father had spoken of it only once in a flat voice that made further questions feel like disrespect. And now a woman he had met less than an hour ago had used his black card to reach straight into it. Vivian saw his face change before he said a word. What happened? He turned the phone toward her. She read the merchant name, and even her usually controlled expression tightened. That can't be random. No, Damian said. It isn't. The ballroom noise seemed to recede around him. Investors still laughed, cameras still flashed, champagne still moved across silver trays. But the night had cracked open, and all the polished luxury around him suddenly felt thin like scenery on a stage. Vivian lowered her voice. Tell me you're freezing the card. Damian slipped the phone back into his pocket. Not yet. Her head turned sharply. Not yet, Damian, she just used unrestricted access to dig into something tied to your family's most buried legal history. That is exactly when you freeze the card. He didn't answer right away. He was thinking about Lena's face when he handed it to her. Not gratitude, not hunger, not even disbelief, really. She had looked like someone being pushed toward a door she had spent years trying not to open. That unsettled him more than the charge itself. Track the rest, he said. Quietly. Vivian let out a breath through her nose, the closest she ever came to visible frustration. And if she's building an extortion case, then I'll know soon enough. But even as he said it, he wasn't sure he believed it. Across the city, Lena Hart stood outside a narrow legal records building under a flickering streetlight, June pressed close against her side. The little girl was sleepy, her small hand wrapped around the sleeve of Lena's borrowed server coat, but she wasn't complaining. She had learned too early that some nights belonged to survival, not comfort. Lena looked down at the black card again before sliding it back into her pocket. It still didn't feel real. The clerk inside had looked at her twice before accepting it as if he expected the machine to reject someone dressed like her. But it hadn't. The payment had gone through. The emergency archive release fee had been paid. A sealed request had been moved forward. And now she had something she had never thought she would touch in this lifetime. A way in. Mama June said softly, tugging her hand. Are we going home now? Lena looked at her daughter and forced her voice to stay gentle. Not yet, baby. One more stop. June nodded, but her eyes drifted to Lena's face with that quiet, watchful intelligence children sometimes had when life made them older than they should be. This is about Grandma Marion, isn't it? Lena felt the blood leave her face for a second. She crouched down quickly. You remember what I told you, don't you? June nodded. That we don't talk about her in front of other people. That's right, because some names make bad people listen. The words were simple. The truth beneath them wasn't. Lena brushed a strand of hair back from June's face and stood again. She hated that her daughter knew even that much. She hated more that it was necessary. They walked 3 blocks to a 24-hour storage facility squeezed between an auto shop and a shuttered laundromat. The fluorescent lights inside buzzed with a tired hum. A bored young man behind the desk looked up with mild annoyance until Lena slid a folded paper across to him. Then his expression changed. "You're here for Unit B-17, he asked. Lena nodded. He checked the paper, then the ID she gave him, then her face. This release came through fast. She said nothing. He handed over a key. The hallway smelled faintly of dust and metal. June's sneakers squeaked on the concrete floor as they passed rows of locked units. Lena's chest had gone tight enough to hurt by the time they reached B-17. Her fingers shook as she lifted the key. For years, that number had lived in the back of her mind, like a prayer and a threat. Her grandmother had made her repeat it when she was 14, sitting at a kitchen table with unpaid bills spread between them, and fear pressed into every silence. If Mercer ever comes back into your life, Marion's mother had said you open this first. Not before. Not after. First. Lena had never asked why. She had known better. The lock clicked open. Inside the narrow unit sat a single metal box, old, and dented the corners darkened by time. It looked too small to hold the kind of weight it had carried for 2 decades. June peered around her mother's arm. "That's it," Lena swallowed. "That's enough." She carried the box out with both hands as carefully as if it might break apart. Her pulse was pounding now, not from fear of what was inside, but from fear of what would happen if it confirmed what she had spent half her life trying not to believe. Back at the Mercer Crown, Damien had abandoned the gala without bothering to excuse himself. Vivian followed him through a private corridor toward the executive elevator's heels, clicking sharply against stone. "You can't disappear on a launch night," she said. "Half the board is still downstairs. Then tell them I was pulled into a family emergency." That would be the first honest thing your family's ever called it. He stopped walking. Vivian stopped too, and for a second the silence between them sharpened. Most people didn't speak to Damien that way. Most people preferred comfort over precision. Vivian never had. "What do you know?" he asked quietly. Her eyes held his. "I know your father made sure nobody in this company ever used the name Mercer Grand in writing unless legal approved it. I know the internal records from that period are sealed tighter than merger documents. And I know a poor single mother with no visible access just found the exact pressure point nobody is supposed to touch." He studied her face. "That's not an answer. It's enough of one for tonight." The elevator doors opened. Damien stepped inside, but the question stayed with him. Vivian came in after him. "There's another charge." He looked up. She held out her phone. Emergency vault release, then a second merchant, South Halstead Audio Restoration. He read the screen, and something cold moved through him. Audio looks like old media conversion. Tapes, maybe. The elevator kept rising. For the first time, Damien felt something he had not expected to feel tonight. Not anger, not even betrayal. Fear. Because money could buy silence, and it could buy lies, and it could bury people who had no power to resist. His family had always understood that. But old recordings were different. Old recordings meant voices, names, timing, things harder to reinterpret once they were heard. Meanwhile, Lena sat in a diner booth that smelled like old coffee and frying oil, the metal box on the seat beside her. June had fallen asleep with her head in Lena's lap wrapped in Lena's coat. Outside traffic hissed through wet streets. Inside, the world felt suspended. Lena finally opened the box. At the top lay photographs, some curled, some stuck together with age. Beneath them sat 2 cassette tapes, labeled in fading ink. A small velvet pouch, a bundle of letters tied with a ribbon that had once been blue, and under all of it a folded page from a newspaper so old the edges crumbled when she touched it. She opened the paper first. Mercer Grand nightclub singer questioned after deadly blaze. Her stomach turned. There it was again. The lie that had shaped her whole life in one ugly headline. No mention of how Marion Hart had died 3 days later in a county hospital. No mention of the witnesses who vanished. No mention of the settlement checks that seemed to erase everyone except the family name still standing. Only blame. Only shame. Lena's hands moved to the velvet pouch next. Inside was a half-burned pendant and a hotel key with Mercer Grand engraved in gold across black enamel. She stared at it breath-shallow now. Then she reached for the top photograph. The image had been taken in a ballroom. Men in tuxedos, women in silk, crystal lights above polished floors. At the center stood a young woman at a piano, smiling toward someone just beyond the frame. Lena knew that face instantly, even though she had only seen it in one faded family picture from before everything broke. Her mother. But that wasn't what made Lena's fingers go numb. It was the man standing 3 feet behind Marion Hart, his face turned slightly toward her, young and unmistakable even through time. Damian Mercer's father. No, not just near her, watching her, as if she mattered. Lena looked down at June, asleep against her, then back at the photo. The room around her seemed to tilt. Whatever this had been, it had been bigger than an old fire. Bigger than a buried accusation, bigger maybe than even her grandmother had dared to say out loud. Her phone buzzed suddenly on the table. Unknown number. For 1 second she thought about ignoring it. Then she answered. A man's voice came through, low and controlled. "Miss Hart," he said, "this is Damian Mercer. I think you and I need to talk." Lena's eyes dropped to the photograph in her hand, and for the first time that night, she understood something with terrifying clarity. Damian Mercer wasn't the end of this story. He was standing right in the middle of it. Lena didn't answer immediately. She held the phone in one hand, the photograph in the other, her pulse loud enough to drown out the hum of the diner around her. Across the table, June stirred slightly but didn't wake. Outside headlights passed like slow-moving shadows across the glass. Ms. Hart Damian's voice came again, sharper this time. "I know you're there." Lena exhaled slowly, forcing her voice steady. "You already knew my name?" A brief pause. "Then I made a call." Of course he had. Men like him didn't wait for answers. They pulled them out of the world. "You shouldn't have," she said quietly. "Then you shouldn't have used my card to access sealed records tied to my family," Damian replied. "That makes us even." Lena's eyes dropped back to the photograph, to the man standing behind her mother, to the look on his face that didn't match anything she had been told growing up. "No," she said. "It doesn't." Another silence, heavier now. "Where are you?" Damian asked. She almost laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was predictable. Control, location, movement, always the same instinct. "That depends," she said. "Are you calling to take the card back, or to find out what I've already seen?" His answer came without hesitation. "Both." Lena closed her eyes for a second, then opened them again. "South Halsted," she said. "There's a diner on the corner. I'll wait for 10 minutes. "Stay there," Damian said. She ended the call before he could say anything else. For a moment she just sat there, the phone still in her hand, the box open beside her. The tapes, the letters, the truth sitting inches away from her like something alive. June shifted again, her small fingers tightening in Lena's coat. "Mom," she murmured, half asleep. "I'm here," Lena whispered, brushing her hair back. "Are we in trouble?" The question landed harder than anything Damian had said. Lena swallowed. "Not if I do this right." June didn't ask anything else. She trusted her mother. That was the part that scared Lena the most. 10 minutes wasn't enough time to understand what she had just opened, but it was enough to decide something. She slipped the photograph back into the box, closed the lid halfway, then paused. Her fingers moved instead to one of the cassette tapes. The label was faded but still legible. M.H. Private. Her mother's initials. Lena stared at it for a long second. Then she picked it up and slid it into her coat pocket. The rest stayed in the box. If Damian Mercer wanted answers, he wasn't getting all of them. Not yet. The bell above the diner door rang. Lena didn't turn immediately. She didn't need to. She felt the shift in the room the same way she had at the hotel. Conversations dipped, attention redirected without people admitting it. Power had a way of announcing itself without raising its voice. Damian Mercer stepped inside, still in his tailored suit, still looking like he belonged in a room filled with chandeliers instead of cracked vinyl booths and chipped mugs. But something in his posture had changed. Less polished, more alert. He scanned the diner once, then found her. For a second, neither of them moved. Then he crossed the room. He didn't sit right away. His eyes went first to the metal box beside her, then to June, then finally to Lena. "You brought your daughter," he said. "I don't have a choice," Lena replied. He pulled out the chair across from her and sat. Up close, the tension in his face was easier to see. Not panic? Not yet. But something close to it. "You accessed Mercer Grand Records," he said, "then a storage unit, then audio restoration. That's not random." "No," Lena said. "It isn't." "What are you looking for?" She held his gaze. "The truth." He leaned back slightly, studying her like he was trying to solve a problem that refused to stay logical. About what Lena didn't answer right away. She reached for the box, opened it just enough to slide one photograph across the table toward him. "Start with that." Damian looked down. The moment his eyes landed on the image, something flickered. Subtle. Fast. But unmistakable. Recognition. His fingers hovered above the photo before finally touching it. "That's my father," he said quietly. Lena nodded once. "I know." His eyes shifted to the woman at the piano. "Who is she?" he asked. Lena felt her throat tighten. "My mother." The words didn't come out loud, but they didn't need to. They existed in the space between them anyway. Damian looked back up at her confusion cutting through the control he usually held so tightly. "That doesn't make sense," he said. "It will." He picked up the photograph again, studying it more closely this time. "Where did you get this?" "From a place your family forgot to burn," Lena replied. His jaw tightened. "You think this proves something? I think it proves your family lied." The air between them sharpened. "Careful," Damian said. "You don't know what you're stepping into." Lena leaned forward slightly, her voice dropping. "I grew up inside it," she said. "I just didn't know it had your name on it." That stopped him. For a second, something cracked through his certainty. Not enough to break it, but enough to shift it. "You're saying your mother worked at Mercer Grand," he said slowly. "I'm saying she died because of what happened there." His grip on the photograph tightened. The fire was investigated. Was it? Lena asked. The question didn't sound like an accusation. It sounded like something worse, a fact waiting to be acknowledged. Damian opened his mouth to respond, but nothing came out. Because for the first time in years, he realized he didn't actually know. Not really. He had inherited a story, repeated it, built his life on top of it. But he had never questioned it. "Why now?" he asked finally. "Why come after this now?" Lena's hand moved unconsciously toward her coat pocket where the tape rested. "Because I finally can." And the card he pressed. "That's all this is to you, a tool." She met his eyes. "You gave it to me to see what I'd do with it," she said. "Now you're seeing." His expression hardened again, but it wasn't as solid as before. And what happens when your 24 hours are over? Lena didn't look away. Then it won't matter. The certainty in her voice unsettled him more than anything else she had said. Explain that. She shook her head slightly. Not yet. Damien leaned forward, frustration breaking through. You don't get to set the terms here. Lena's lips pressed together. No, she said quietly. You don't. The words landed harder than they should have. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then June shifted in her sleep, letting out a soft sound. Lena's hand immediately moved to her gentle automatic. Damien watched that, and something about it didn't fit the picture he had built in his head. This wasn't greed. This wasn't strategy. This was something else, something deeper, something more dangerous. His phone buzzed in his pocket. He ignored it. Then it buzzed again, and again. Finally, he pulled it out, irritation already forming. The screen lit up with a message from Vivian. He read it once, then again, and the irritation vanished completely. What is it? Lena asked. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he slowly turned the phone toward her. On the screen was a scanned document, an internal Mercer legal file, recently unlocked, and highlighted in red A name. Adrian Mercer, Damien's brother. Lena's breath caught. Below it, one line stood out like it had been waiting decades to be seen. Witness present at time of ignition. The diner suddenly felt too small, too quiet, because whatever happened at Mercer Grand, it hadn't started with her mother, and it hadn't ended with the fire. Damien didn't blink as he looked at the name on the screen. Adrian Mercer. For a moment, the diner seemed to fall away, the noise fading into something distant and hollow. His brother wasn't just a memory. He wasn't just the golden story the family told at every gathering. He had been there that night. That file is wrong, Damien said, but his voice didn't carry the weight it usually did. It sounded rehearsed, defensive. Lena didn't answer immediately. She watched him studying the crack that had just formed in something he had probably never questioned before. Is it? She asked softly. The question didn't challenge him. It exposed him. Damien clenched his jaw. Adrian died years after that fire. He had nothing to do with it. Lena leaned back slightly, her fingers gripping the edge of the table. Then why is his name in a witness file your company buried? He opened his mouth, but nothing came out. Because for the first time in years he realized something uncomfortable. He didn't actually know. He had inherited a story, accepted it, built his identity around it. Adrian Mercer had been perfect, brilliant, untouchable, the son their father had admired without hesitation. The one Damien had spent his life trying and failing to match. And now that same name was sitting inside a file no one was supposed to open. There's more. Lena said, her voice quieter now, almost careful. There's always more. She reached into her coat and pulled out the cassette tape. Damien's eyes followed instantly. What is that? Something your family hoped didn't survive. He let out a short breath. You're making a lot of assumptions. Lena shook her head slowly. No, I'm catching up to the truth you were protected from. The words landed harder than she expected, but she didn't take them back. She couldn't. Damien stared at the tape, then back at her. You think a piece of old audio changes anything, I think it explains everything. Silence settled between them, thick and sharp. For a second, it felt like the entire room was waiting for him to decide whether to lean closer or walk away. Play it, Damien said. Lena didn't move. Not here. His eyes narrowed slightly. Why? Because once you hear it, she said, you don't get to pretend you don't know anymore. That was the first moment something in her voice made him hesitate. Not fear, but something close. His phone buzzed again, vibrating against the table. He ignored it. Then it buzzed again. And again. Finally, he pulled it out, irritation already forming, but the moment he read the message, that irritation disappeared. 3 missed calls from Vivian. 2 new messages. He opened the latest. "Where are you? We have a problem. Legal just flagged an internal breach. Someone accessed restricted Mercer Grand files from outside the network. You need to come in. Now." Damien looked up slowly. Lena was already watching him. "They know," he said. "Of course they do," she replied. "You think something like this stays buried without someone guarding it?" He leaned back, running a hand through his hair for the first time that night. The gesture was small, but it broke something in the image he carried. He didn't look like a man in control anymore. He looked like someone realizing control had always been an illusion. "You need to leave the city," he said suddenly. Lena blinked. "What if this goes where I think it's going? They won't let you keep digging," he said. "My family doesn't handle exposure well." Lena let out a quiet breath, something between disbelief and exhaustion. "Your solution is for me to run. My solution is for you to stay alive." That stopped her. For a moment, neither of them spoke. June shifted in her sleep, her small hand tightening against Lena's coat. Lena looked down at her daughter, then back at Damien. "I've been running my whole life," she said softly. "It didn't save my mother." The words hit him harder than anything else she had said. He leaned forward, lowering his voice. "You don't understand what you're stepping into." Lena met his gaze without hesitation. "No," she said. "You don't understand what I've already stepped through." The difference between those two things hung in the air, sharp and undeniable. Damien looked at the box, then at the tape, then at his phone, still glowing with warnings. For the first time in years, he felt trapped between 2 worlds, the empire he had built, and the truth sitting across from him. "Come with me," he said finally. Lena frowned. Somewhere we can listen to that," he replied. "Somewhere controlled." She almost laughed. "Controlled by who? By me. That's exactly the problem." His expression tightened, but the authority behind it wasn't the same anymore. "Then you tell me where." Lena studied him for a long second. Then she nodded. "There's a place," she said. "But you're not going to like it. Try me." She stood slowly, lifting June carefully into her arms without waking her. The metal box sat for a second, forgotten, before she reached back and grabbed it. "You coming?" she asked. Damien was already on his feet. They stepped out into the cold night, 2 people from completely different worlds, walking toward something neither of them fully understood. The city moved around them unaware. Lena led him down a narrow street, past closed storefronts and flickering lights, until they reached a small building with a faded sign. South Halstead Audio Restoration. Damien stopped when he saw it. "You already paid them?" "Yeah." For what? She pushed the door open. "To make sure whatever's on that tape doesn't stay buried." Inside, the air smelled like dust and old wires. A man in his 60s looked up from behind a cluttered desk. "You're back sooner than I expected," he said. "I need it now," Lena replied. The man's eyes shifted to Damien, taking in the suit, the posture, the presence. "And he is part of the reason this matters." Something about that answer landed in Damien's chest before he understood why. The man studied them both, then reached under the desk and pulled out a small playback device. "I managed to clean 1 tape," he said. "Not all of it, but enough." Lena stepped forward. "Play it." "You sure? I've been waiting my whole life." The man nodded and pressed a button. Static filled the room first. Then a voice. Male. Young. Unsteady. You don't understand, this wasn't supposed to happen. Damien froze, because even through distortion and time, he knew that voice. Adrian. She's not going to stay quiet, another voice said. Older. Controlled. Then make sure she doesn't, Adrian replied. The tape crackled. Lena's breath caught. Damien's hands went still. Because the voice that came next wasn't Adrian's, and it wasn't a stranger. It was someone Damien had trusted his entire life. The room didn't move, but everything inside Damien did. He didn't breathe, didn't blink, didn't even shift his weight as the tape continued to crackle through the old speakers. The voice that followed Adrian's wasn't distorted enough to hide. It was calm, measured, familiar, in a way that turned Damien's stomach cold. Clean it up, the voice said. No witnesses. No loose ends. Lena's fingers tightened around the edge of the table. She didn't need to ask who it was. She saw it in Damien's face before the truth fully formed in her own mind. Damien stepped forward slowly, like the ground beneath him had become unstable. Stop it, he said. The man behind the desk hesitated, then paused the tape. Silence slammed into the room heavier than the audio had been. No, Lena said, her voice sharp now. Let it play. Damien turned toward her, something breaking through his control. You don't understand what you're hearing. I understand exactly what I'm hearing, she shot back. That wasn't an accident. That wasn't a fire that just happened. That was someone making sure my mother never spoke again. Damien's jaw clenched. You don't know that. Lena took a step closer to him, June still asleep in her arms, her voice lower but stronger. Then who was it? He didn't answer. Because he did know. Or at least part of him had always known. The man behind the desk pressed play again. Static filled the air, then Adrian's voice returned more frantic now. This is too much. I didn't mean for it to go this far. You meant exactly what you did, the other voice replied, colder now. You made a mistake. Now we fix it. I didn't start the fire, Adrian said. The tape cut sharply, the audio fragmenting into noise before dropping into silence again. Lena's breath came out unsteady. He didn't start it, she whispered. He said it. Damien's mind raced, trying to catch up to something that refused to stay in place. Adrian had always been the one who could do no wrong, the one their father had trusted with everything, the one who had never needed to prove himself. And now that same voice had just admitted not innocence, but something worse. He turned to the man behind the desk. Is that everything? The man shook his head. That's all I could recover so far. The rest is damaged. Might take time. Might not come back at all. How long? Lena asked. Could be hours. Could be days. Lena's grip tightened around June. We don't have days. Damien looked at her sharply. What do you mean? She met his gaze. The building is being demolished tomorrow. The words landed like a blow. What building? He asked, even though he already knew. Mercer Grand, she said. For a second, no one spoke. Because that changed everything. Damien ran a hand across his face, his thoughts moving faster, now sharper. Why wasn't I told about the demolition schedule? Because it's already approved, Lena said, and because whoever buried this made sure no one would have time to dig it back up. His phone buzzed again. This time he didn't ignore it. Vivian. He answered. Where are you? Her voice came immediately tight and controlled, but carrying something underneath. Out, he said. What's happening? They've escalated, she replied. Board members are calling emergency sessions. Legal is locking down anything tied to Mercer Grand. And Damien. She paused. Say it. There's a directive being drafted to destroy physical records before the demolition. His grip on the phone tightened. Who authorized that? Another pause. Your mother. The words didn't hit all at once. They sank in slowly, like something inevitable. Damien closed his eyes for a brief second. When he opened them, Lena was watching him. She didn't need to ask. She already knew. They're going to erase it, she said. Yes, Damien replied. And you're still standing here deciding what to believe. That stung more than it should have. He stepped closer to her, lowering his voice. You think this is easy for me? You think I just flip a switch and turn against everything I've ever known? I think you already know the truth, Lena said. You're just deciding whether it matters more than your last name. The room felt smaller, tighter, like it was closing in on both of them. June stirred again, her eyes fluttering open slightly. Mama Lena softened instantly. I'm here. Are we going home? Lena hesitated. For a second too long. Damien saw it, and something inside him shifted again. Not logic, not strategy, something else. Come with me, he said. Lena looked up. Again. This time you don't get to argue, he said. If they're destroying records, we need access before that happens. And I'm the only one who can get us inside before it's sealed. She studied him carefully. Why would you help me? She asked. Damien didn't answer immediately, because the truth was he didn't fully understand it himself yet. Finally, he said, because if what's on that tape is real, then I've been living inside a lie my entire life. Lena held his gaze. Then slowly she nodded. Then we don't have time to waste. Damien turned to the man behind the desk. Keep working on the rest of the tape. Whatever you recover, call me. The man nodded. They stepped back out into the night, the cold air hitting harder this time. Damien pulled out his phone and dialed. Get the car, he said when the line connected. And reroute security clearance to Mercer Grand site. I want full access. There was a pause. That location is restricted, sir. Not for me. He hung up. Lena shifted June in her arms, adjusting her weight. If this goes wrong, it already has, Damien said. They stood there for a second, side by side, staring at the dark street ahead. Two people pulled into the same storm from opposite directions, and neither of them had any idea how far it would go. Because somewhere between the tape, the file, and the name Adrian Mercer, they had just uncovered something far worse than a hidden truth. They had uncovered a lie that was still being protected. And by the time they reached Mercer Grand, it might already be gone. The car cut through the city faster than anything Lena had ever experienced, smooth and silent, like the world moved out of its way. June was asleep again in the back seat, her head resting against Lena's shoulder, unaware that her life was shifting in ways no child should have to understand. Lena stared out the window, but she wasn't seeing the streets. She was seeing the tape, the voice, the moment everything she had believed about her mother's death began to fracture. Across from her, Damien sat still, his gaze fixed forward, but his mind was nowhere near the road ahead. It was buried in the past he had never questioned. You said your brother didn't start the fire? Lena said quietly, breaking the silence. But he was there. Damien didn't answer immediately. His jaw tightened, and for the first time since she met him, he looked like someone who didn't have control over the outcome. Adrian was reckless, he said finally. But he wasn't a murderer. Lena turned toward him. That's not what the tape said. It didn't say he started it either. Damien shot back sharper than he intended. It said he made a mistake. And someone else decided to cover it up? Lena replied. The words hung between them, heavy and unavoidable. Damien leaned back slightly, closing his eyes for a brief second. He could still hear the voice on the tape clear, despite the distortion. Not Adrian. Not a stranger. Someone closer. Someone he had trusted without question. Someone who had shaped everything he believed about the Mercer name. My mother, he said under his breath. Lena didn't react immediately, but something in her expression shifted. Not surprise, not shock, just confirmation. You knew, she said. No, Damien replied quickly. Then he stopped, because that wasn't entirely true. He hadn't known. But there had always been something off in the way Mercer Grand was never discussed, something final in the way his mother shut down any questions about that time. I suspected something wasn't right, he admitted. But not this. Lena looked away, her eyes drifting to June. My mother didn't get the luxury of suspicion, she said softly. She got labeled, erased, blamed for something she didn't do. Damien didn't respond, because there was nothing he could say that wouldn't sound like defense. And for the first time, he wasn't sure he wanted to defend it. The car slowed as they approached the outskirts of the old Mercer Grand site. It stood like a shadow of what it once was, surrounded by temporary fencing and heavy machinery parked like waiting predators. Floodlights lit the structure in harsh white, exposing every scar, every broken window, every charred edge that time hadn't been able to hide completely. Lena leaned forward slightly, her breath catching. That's it, she whispered. Damien followed her gaze. He hadn't seen the building in years, not in person, only in archived images and sanitized reports. But standing in front of it now, it felt different, less like a property, more like a grave that had never been properly closed. The car came to a stop. A security guard approached immediately, his posture shifting the moment he recognized Damien. Mr. Mercer, we weren't expecting— I don't need expectations, Damien said, stepping out. I need access. The guard hesitated. We have orders to restrict entry until demolition begins in the morning. Damien's eyes locked onto his. Those orders don't apply to me. There was a moment of tension. Then the guard stepped aside. Lena stepped out of the car, carefully holding June close. The air smelled like dust, and something older, something burned into the structure itself. She tightened her grip around her daughter as they moved forward. Inside the building was worse. The grand lobby that once held music and laughter was now hollow and cracked. The marble floors fractured, the walls stained with smoke that had never fully faded. Pieces of the ceiling hung low, and the silence inside felt heavy, like it remembered everything. Lena stopped walking. This is where she worked, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Damien stood beside her, looking around. You've never been here before? No, she said. I wasn't supposed to. June stirred again, her eyes opening slightly. Where are we? Lena brushed her hair gently. Somewhere important. They moved deeper into the building, their footsteps echoing through the empty halls. Damien's phone buzzed again, but he ignored it. Whatever was happening outside didn't matter right now, not compared to what they were standing inside. Where would records be? Lena asked. Damien thought for a moment. Lower level. Storage maintenance archives. Anything they didn't want public. They found the stairwell descending into a darker, colder space beneath the main floor. The air grew heavier, the smell stronger. When they reached the bottom, Lena felt something in her chest tighten. This was it. This was where things had been hidden. Damien pushed open a metal door, and it creaked loudly in the silence. Inside was a room lined with old filing cabinets, some open, some emptied, others still locked. Boxes were scattered across the floor, some already marked for removal. They're already clearing it out, Lena said. Then we're late, Damien replied. He moved quickly, scanning labels, opening drawers, searching for anything that hadn't been taken yet. Lena set June down gently on a cleaner patch of floor, kneeling beside one of the boxes. Help me look, she said softly. June nodded, still half asleep, but trying to stay awake. Minutes passed. Then Lena froze. Damien, he turned. She held up a file. The cover was worn, edges darkened, but the label was still visible. Mercer Grand Incident Report, internal. Damien stepped closer, slowly. Open it, he said. Lena hesitated for just a second. Then she did. The pages inside were dense with text reports, signatures, statements. But one section had been marked differently. Highlighted, sealed once, then reopened. Witness statement. Name Adrian Mercer. Damien felt his chest tighten. Lena flipped the page, and what she saw made her breath stop, because beneath Adrian's name was another one, signed in ink that hadn't faded. Evelyn Mercer. Authorization narrative revision approved. Lena looked up slowly. Damien didn't move. Neither of them spoke. Because the truth was no longer something they were chasing. It was sitting in their hands. And it was worse than either of them had imagined. Damien didn't reach for the file right away. He just stood there staring at his mother's name written in ink that hadn't faded, as if time itself had refused to erase what she had done. The words, narrative revision approved, felt colder than anything else in the room. Not just a cover-up. Not just silence. A deliberate rewriting of the truth. Lena held the file tighter, her hands trembling now, not from fear, but from something deeper. Rage that had waited years to be justified, pain that finally had somewhere to land. She signed it, Lena whispered. She signed the lie. Damien stepped closer, slowly, his voice quieter than she had ever heard it. Let me see. She hesitated just for a second, then handed it over. He read through the page, his eyes moving faster as the meaning settled in. Adrian Mercer present at the time of ignition. Statement modified. Responsibility redirected. External blame assigned. Assigned. Not discovered. Not proven. Assigned. Damien exhaled sharply, like the air had been knocked out of him. They rewrote everything he said under his breath. They erased her, Lena replied. He looked up at her, and for the first time there was no defense left in his expression. No distance, no authority, just something raw and unguarded. I didn't know, he said. Lena didn't soften. That doesn't change what happened. No, he admitted. It doesn't. Behind them, June shifted, sitting up slowly, her eyes adjusting to the dim light. Mama, she murmured. Lena turned immediately, her voice gentler. I'm here. June looked around, confused. It smells weird here. It's an old place, Lena said softly. June's eyes moved to Damien, then back to her mother. Is this where Grandma was? Lena paused, then nodded. June didn't ask anything else. She just reached for her mother's hand. Damien watched that moment, something tightening in his chest. It wasn't just about the past anymore. It was about what had been passed down, what had been inherited not in money, but in silence and damage. His phone vibrated again, louder this time in the stillness. He pulled it out automatically. Vivian, he answered. Where are you? She asked immediately. Mercer Grand, he said. There was a sharp inhale on the other end. You need to leave. Now. Why they've accelerated the demolition timeline, she said. Equipment is already being moved into position. They're not waiting until morning anymore. Damien's eyes lifted slowly. They're trying to destroy it tonight. Yes, Vivian replied. And Damien, there's more. Say it. There's a private security team en route. Not ours. His grip tightened around the phone. Who sent them? A pause. Then, your mother. The line went silent. Damien lowered the phone slowly. They're coming, he said. Lena's body stiffened. To stop us, to erase everything before we can take it out of here. The weight of that settled instantly. Lena moved quickly, closing the file and placing it back into the box. Then we don't leave empty-handed. Damien nodded once. Take everything you can carry. They moved fast now. Damien opened cabinets, pulling out any remaining documents that hadn't been cleared. Lena grabbed photographs, reports, anything with names, dates, signatures. June stayed close, clutching the edge of Lena's coat, her small face tight with confusion, but silent. Footsteps echoed faintly from above. Damien froze. "You hear that?" Lena whispered. He nodded. "They're early." The sound grew louder. "Not construction, not machines. People." Lena's heart began to race. "We need to go." "Not yet," Damien said, scanning the room quickly. "There's one more section." He moved to the far wall where a locked cabinet stood untouched. Lena followed. "We don't have time. We don't have a choice," he said, pulling at the handle. It didn't budge. The footsteps above them became clearer now. Voices, low, controlled, moving with purpose. Damien stepped back, then drove his shoulder into the cabinet door. Once, twice. On the third hit, the lock snapped. The door swung open. Inside were fewer files but thicker ones, sealed, marked confidential. Damien grabbed the top folder and flipped it open quickly. His breath caught. "What is it?" Lena asked. He turned the page toward her. "Insurance claim authorization. Cause of fire, electrical failure. Signed, approved, closed." But beneath that, a second page. Internal amendment. Cause human negligence. Name redacted, then rewritten. Marion Hart. Lena's vision blurred for a second. "They changed it twice," she said. Damien nodded slowly. First to hide Adrian, then to bury her. Footsteps reached the stairwell. Closer now. Damien, Lena said, urgency cutting through her voice. He grabbed the file, shoved it into the box, then turned to her. "We're done. Let's go." They moved quickly toward the door, but the moment they stepped into the hallway, the beam of a flashlight cut across the darkness. "Stop right there." The voice was firm, professional, not security, something else. Damien stepped slightly in front of Lena without thinking. The light moved upward, revealing two men in dark jackets, their posture too rigid, their eyes too focused. Private, not company. "Mr. Mercer," one of them said calmly. "Your mother sent us to escort you out." Damien didn't move. "And her?" The man's gaze shifted to Lena. "She's not part of that instruction." Lena's grip tightened around the box. June pressed closer to her side. Damien's voice dropped cold and clear. "Then you're not escorting anyone." The man's expression didn't change. "I'm afraid that's not your decision tonight." The silence that followed felt like the edge of something about to break. Because for the first time, Damien Mercer wasn't standing as the most powerful person in the room, and Lena realized something just as dangerous. The truth they had uncovered wasn't just being protected. It was being hunted. Damien didn't step back. He didn't raise his voice either. He simply stood there, placing himself fully between Lena and the two men, as if instinct had already made the decision his mind was still catching up to. "You don't get to decide," that he said quietly. The man with the flashlight tilted his head slightly, studying him. "Mr. Mercer, we're not here to negotiate. We're here to contain a situation." Lena felt June's fingers tighten around her coat, small and trembling now. She shifted her stance, holding the box closer to her chest, her eyes moving between the men and Damien. "Contain," she repeated. "You mean erase?" The second man stepped forward slightly. "You need to hand over what you're carrying." Damien's voice cut through immediately. No, it wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. The kind of authority he had built his life on was still there, but now it was being used in a way it never had before. Not to protect a company, not to protect a reputation, but to stand against it. The first man's expression hardened. "You're making this more difficult than it needs to be." Damien took a step forward. You came into my property under my name with instructions that don't come from me. That makes this difficult." A flicker of tension passed between the two men. It wasn't fear, but it was recognition. He still carried weight, just not as much as he used to. Lena saw it too. The balance of power wasn't gone. It was shifting. "Last chance," the man said. "Hand it over and you walk out of here clean." Lena let out a breath, something sharp and almost bitter. "Clean," she said. "That's what you call this?" June looked up at her confused, sensing the tension, even if she didn't understand it. Mama Lena tightened her arm around her gently. "It's okay." But it wasn't. Damien glanced back at Lena for a split second. Something passed between them. Not trust, not fully, but alignment. Then he looked forward again. "We're leaving," he said. "And you're not stopping us." The second man shifted his stance, blocking the hallway more firmly. "That's not how this ends." For a moment, everything held still. Then the sound came. Not from the men, not from inside, but from outside. Heavy machinery, engines turning, metal grinding against metal. Lena's heart dropped. "They're starting," she whispered. Damien's jaw tightened. "They're not waiting." The man with the flashlight didn't react. "This building is scheduled for demolition," he said. "That's not your concern." "It is when you're still inside it," Lena snapped. The man's gaze shifted back to her. "Then you should have left when you had the chance." Damien moved before the moment could settle. He grabbed Lena's arm, not rough but firm, and pulled her toward the side corridor. "This way," he said. The men reacted instantly. Stop footsteps echoed behind them. Fast now, intentional. Lena didn't look back. She ran, holding June close, the box pressed against her chest. The hallway split ahead, debris scattered across the floor. Damien moved like he had memorized the building, even though he hadn't been here in years. Instinct, layout, structure, it all came back faster than he expected. "There's a service exit," he said. "If it's not sealed." "And if it is?" Lena asked. He didn't answer. Behind them, the footsteps grew louder. One of the men shouted something, but it blurred into the echo of the building itself. Lena's breath came faster now, her arms aching from holding June, but she didn't slow down. She couldn't. The corridor narrowed, then opened into a half-collapsed section of the building. Moonlight filtered through broken walls, casting jagged shadows across the floor. "There," Damien said, pointing toward a metal door at the far end. They pushed toward it. Lena reached it first, shifting June to one side and grabbing the handle. She pulled. It didn't move. "It's locked," she said, panic rising in her voice. Damien reached past her, trying it himself. Nothing. The footsteps behind them were close now. Too close. Lena's chest tightened. "Damien." He stepped back, scanning quickly, then grabbed a rusted metal bar from the ground. "Move." She did. He swung once. The sound echoed like a gunshot. The lock dented. Not enough. He swung again, harder. The metal cracked. One more hit, and the lock snapped open. He yanked the door wide. Cold air rushed in. Freedom. For a second, they didn't move. Then Damien grabbed Lena's arm again. "Go." They stepped out into the open gravel, crunching under their feet as they moved away from the building. Behind them, voices shouted, but no one followed immediately. The men had stopped at the doorway. Not chasing, not rushing, just watching. Lena turned back for a split second. And that's when she saw it. The machines, already positioned, already ready. And inside the broken windows of Mercer Grand, lights flickered, as if the building itself was about to be erased from existence. Damien stopped a few steps ahead, his breath heavy now, his mind racing faster than it ever had. Lena caught up to him, clutching the box tighter. "We have it," she said. "That's what matters." He shook his head slowly. No. She frowned. What do you mean? He turned to face her fully now. This doesn't end with us walking away, he said. This ends with everyone knowing what they did. Lena stared at him. Your family? Yes. The word came out without hesitation, and that was the moment everything changed. Because this wasn't just about truth anymore. It was about exposure. Lena felt it too. The shift. The line they had crossed. They won't let you do that, she said. Damien's eyes moved back to the building. Then they'll have to stop me. Behind them, engines roared louder, metal arms lifted, and the first impact slammed into Mercer Grand. The sound echoed across the night. Lena flinched. June woke fully this time, startled, her small voice shaking. What was that? Lena held her tighter. It's okay, she whispered, even though it wasn't. Damien didn't look away, because in that moment he understood something with absolute clarity. They weren't just destroying a building. They were destroying the last place the truth had been hiding. And if he didn't move fast enough, it would disappear forever. The sound of steel tearing through concrete echoed long after the first impact. Damien didn't move. He stood there as Mercer Grand began to collapse, piece by piece, the past crumbling in front of him exactly the way his family had planned, quick, efficient, irreversible. But this time it wasn't enough. Not anymore. Lena watched the building fall, her grip tightening around the box, as if it were the only thing holding the truth in place. June clung to her eyes wide, too young to understand what was being destroyed, but old enough to feel that it mattered. Mom, is it gone? She whispered. Lena swallowed hard. Not all of it, she said quietly, because some things had already made it out. 3 days later, the city woke up to a story no one could ignore. It started with a single leak, then another, then everything. Audio recordings, internal reports, insurance documents, names, signatures, dates. The Mercer Grand fire, once dismissed as an unfortunate accident, was suddenly exposed as something else entirely. A cover-up, a manipulation of truth, a decision made by power to protect itself at the cost of someone who had none. The media moved fast. They always did when money and betrayal collided. By noon, the name Marion Hart was trending. By evening, so was Mercer. Damien stood in front of a wall of cameras, the glare of lights harsh against his eyes. Reporters shouted questions, voices overlapping, each one sharper than the last. Did your family falsify records? Was your brother involved? Did your mother approve the cover-up? What do you say to the family of Marion Hart? For once, Damien didn't deflect. He didn't redirect. He didn't protect. He stepped forward. My family buried the truth, he said, his voice steady, but stripped of everything that once made it untouchable. And I was part of that system, whether I knew it or not. The noise dropped just enough for people to listen. What happened at Mercer Grand was not an accident, he continued. And the woman blamed for it was innocent. Somewhere in the crowd, Lena watched from a distance June's hand in hers. Damien didn't look for her. He didn't need to. This company was built on a lie, he said. And that lie ends today. Behind him, board members shifted, legal advisors whispered urgently, damage control already unraveling. But none of it mattered anymore, because the truth had already broken through. Within hours, the consequences began. Investigations reopened, lawsuits filed, shares dropped, partnerships pulled. Names once protected were suddenly exposed under a light they couldn't control. Evelyn Mercer didn't appear publicly. She didn't deny anything either. Silence became her last defense, but it wasn't enough. For the first time in decades, the Mercer name didn't command power. It carried weight, and that weight came from everything it had tried to hide. A week later, Lena stood in a quiet office holding a different kind of document in her hands. It wasn't old, it wasn't hidden, it was new. Official recognition. Marian Hart cleared of all accusations. Cause of death revised. Responsibility removed. Restored. Lena stared at the paper for a long time before she exhaled. Not relief. Not entirely. Something softer. Something quieter. Something like peace. June sat beside her, swinging her legs slightly. "Does that mean Grandma wasn't bad?" she asked. Lena looked at her, her voice steady but full. "It means Grandma was never bad." June smiled, and for the first time there was no shadow behind it. Outside, life didn't change all at once. It never did. The world kept moving. People kept talking. The news cycle shifted. But for Lena, something had shifted permanently. The past no longer owned her, and it no longer owned her daughter. Across the city, Damien stood in a much smaller room than the ones he was used to. No glass walls, no skyline, just a desk, a chair, and a silence that felt different from the one he had lived with before. He had stepped down. Not forced. Chosen. Because power without truth had become something he couldn't carry anymore. The black card sat on the desk in front of him. The same one he had handed to Lena like a test. He picked it up, turning it slowly between his fingers. He had thought it represented control, wealth, possibility. He had been wrong. It had been a key, not to spending, but to everything he had been taught not to see. There was a knock at the door. He looked up. Lena stood there, June beside her. For a second, none of them spoke. Then Lena stepped inside. "You kept it," she said, glancing at the card. Damien nodded. Didn't feel right to take it back. June looked around the room, curious. "This is your office for now," he said. She nodded like that made sense. Lena stepped closer, her expression softer than it had ever been when she looked at him before. Not trust, not fully, but something close. "They're turning part of the site into a memorial," she said, "for the people who died." Damien nodded once. "They should have done that a long time ago." "They're putting her name there," Lena added. "My mother's." That hit him in a way nothing else had. "Good," he said quietly. Lena studied him for a moment. "You lost a lot." He gave a small, almost distant smile. "I think I lost the wrong things." June stepped forward suddenly, holding something in her hand. It was the stuffed elephant she had carried since that first night. She held it out to him. "For you," she said. Damien blinked, caught off guard. "You don't have to. It's okay," she said simply. "You helped my mom." He took it slowly, like it was something fragile. "Thank you," he said. June nodded, satisfied, then stepped back to Lena's side. The room fell quiet again, but it wasn't empty. Not like before. Lena turned toward the door, then paused. "That card," she said, glancing back at it one last time. "You didn't give it to the wrong person?" Damien looked at her. "No," he said. "I finally gave it to the right one." She held his gaze for a second longer, then left. Damien stood there, the small stuffed elephant in one hand, the black card on the desk. For the first time in his life, he understood something clearly. Money could build empires. But truth decided what survived them. And sometimes the most expensive thing a man could ever pay for wasn't what he bought. It was what he finally chose to face. If this story stayed with you, share what you would have done in his place, and stay with the channel for more stories, where one decision changes everything.